This past week, I had the opportunity to spend many days with boys at a camp. So everything you think would take place did take place. All of the craziness, the wildness, the kids being out, in many cases for the first time in their lives and being out with other people. One episode was so hilarious to me, I've even debated to even tell you guys because I may just take 15 minutes to laugh and not be able to. When I tell this to other people, they don't laugh at all. Their response is, they're just kids. And well, that's why I'm laughing so hard. But many of them went fishing for the very first time. We're teaching them how to let the line out a little bit from the end so that the bobber's not right next to the end of the rod and other little things. And they know that if it just lands a few feet off the shore, you'll probably catch a little fish. If you can only throw it all the way to the middle of the lake, that's where the biggest fish are. That's what thoughts are going. So I saw one kid, and he's reaching as far back as he could, and he slings it, but this time he noticed there was extra weight on it. And in his high, shrilly pitched boy's voice, he said, "There's a sock on the end of my line." So he had reached so far back, he picked up someone's sock that was on the ground and slung it out into the lake. And I have no idea what happened after that, because I had to go run and hide behind a pickup truck and laugh my head off at the hilariousness of these kids. And he's wondering, where did that sock come from? So was he sinful in any way with what he did? Let's move on to the others. The boys are learning for the first time. So they're staring at the lake, and they're just taking the rod and reel back and wait, be careful, because the people behind you, you don't want to rip their clothes off or rip their hair out of their head. And so all the stuff that goes with kids. Now, if they had pulled or snagged someone, would that have been selfishness? Oh, elsewhere during the week, they're back in the cabin, and they're yelling at each other, "That's my item. Well, those are my glasses." Is that selfishness? I mean, where do you draw the line from childishness and hilarity to the point of they're being selfish? And the real point of our message today is, where do you draw the line for us as human beings who are adults? Does selfishness exist? I want us to continue our series through the book of Daniel, and today we come to chapter 11. In this chapter, we have one of the absolute most amazing passages. I didn't know it existed until this week. In one particular aspect, I thought that if there were prophecies in the Bible, there would be Micah 5:2, that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. And then another passage over here in Zechariah that says there will be 30 pieces of silver. And a passage over here in Psalm 22 where his clothes will be divided up by casting lots. I never knew this passage existed, where this will take place, and this will take place, and this will take place with exact precision. Dozens and dozens of verses, one after another, giving precise messages of what will take place hundreds of years later. I remind you that this passage was written or given to Daniel in the 3rd year of King Cyrus, which is somewhere around 533 BC. The very first verse we'll look at, verse 2, begins where he is, and it continues until 400 years later, around 146 BC. He gives one story right after the next of what will take place. But an overall theme throughout this entire chapter is selfishness. Run rampant to the point of severe pain for those who don't give in to people's selfishness. Let's look at verse 2, where we see the beginning of selfishness in leaders. And we're looking first in verse 2 to see those in Persia. Verse 2 says, "And now I tell you the truth, behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece." If that was the only word of prophecy in the entire Bible, I would be impressed and amazed. But this is the way it goes the whole chapter. It's amazing. While he's writing it, remember, when did he write it? 3rd year of Cyrus. He's the current king. The passage says there will be 3 more. One will be Cambyses, the other one is Smyrtus, and the other one is Darius the First. Darius of Persia, not Darius the Mede. Then the 4th king afterwards is a guy named Xerxes. He's the baddest of the bad, according to many psychologists. He was wacko in the head, and he wanted the empire to be even bigger. Sure enough, the passage says, the 4th will gain far more riches than all of them. His name, Xerxes. He was the husband of Queen Esther. He was the epitome of selfishness. Half of his house consisted of the harem. We take girl number 22 one time, girl number 38, next time girl number 14. I mean, that's his selfishness. And you never make a request. You dare not go before his presence without a smile, because that means he's not the most wonderful person in your life. He will kill you, literally. One guy dared to make that demand. His name was Pythias. He went up to the king and said, "Oh, great king of all, may you live and reign forever," which was the statement everyone had to make. He says, "You are doing such a great work in your conquerings, I will give you 3,993 derricks of gold." A derrick was a piece of coin named after his father, Darius. So there's the coin, and he has 3,993,000. Xerxes is going ballistic. No one has ever given him anything ever before. I wonder why. But God says don't ever give anything to a wealthy person, because it's always for manipulative reasons. But Pythias didn't know any better. So after the king says, and he says, "You need to add this to your army so your army will be great." He says, "I'm so excited, I'll add an extra 7,000 to make it an even 4 million derricks of gold." At that point, Pythias said, "Oh, by the way, would you please spare my son from going to war?" The king was enraged. "How dare you make a request of the king? Guards, bring his son in." They brought his son in, cut him in 2, placed each half on each side of the gate, and had the entire army march through. That's just one of many stories I could give of Queen Esther's husband. Selfish to the bone. He wanted to expand the kingdom. He goes as far west as he can, and he runs into that roadblock called Greece. You know, all these stories I've heard about for years, but don't have any clue what's really taking place. The Battle of Thermopylae and others were Persia's trying to conquer Greece. But look what happens. We now go to verses 3 through 20. We now look at the kings of Greece. The first one, you know, is the 3rd time that Daniel has prophesied about Alexander the Great. A mighty king will arise. He will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. That phrase will appear 3 times in this selfish chapter. People, kings rising up. I will do what I want to do, and I don't care who dies or who suffers. I get what I want. The selfishness is rampant. He has 2 sons. Both of them are killed. So when he's about to die, he needs to pass the kingdom on. Who does he give it to? He decides to give it to his 4 generals. So he divides the kingdom into 4 parts. So now look at verse 4. But as soon as Alexander has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out toward the 4 points of the compass. though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority, which he wielded. For his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others besides them. That's amazing. More prophecies about the future. I still don't know how to get an easy map to you guys without my having to lug or haul extra stuff here. But if you could think at all of a map of the Middle East, let's picture Israel here. Here's the Mediterranean Sea. Underneath it is Egypt. Above it is Europe, and all of this is Asia. For whatever reason, Alexander divided his land up so that two people were over in Greece and Macedon. One of them, the Ptolemies, had all of Egypt and the surrounding areas of Africa and even the Sinai Peninsula. And then there was another group known as the Seleucids, because that was the name of the leader, Seleucid. He had the northern area, which we will call Syria, still today Syria, but he had all of Turkey and all of the land, present-day Pakistan, Iran, all the way to India. But here's what I want you to see. Here's Israel, here are the Ptolemies, here's the Seleucids, here's the Mediterranean Sea, and here's the desert. Every time these two fight, guess where they have to go? They have to stomp onto Israel to get to the other side. Let me now read verses 5 and following, and after each verse, I'm going to give a brief, short statement of who these people are. Bear with me for about 5 minutes. Verse 5. The king of the south, the Ptolemies, will grow strong, along with one of his princes, who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion. His dominion will be a great dominion indeed. So who was this? This was the very first king, the general who became king. His name was Ptolemy I. He was the ruler of Egypt. Let's go to verse 6. After some years, they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north, Seleucids, to carry out a peaceful arrangement. But she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power. But she will be given up along with those who brought her in, and the one who sired her, as well as he who supported her in those times. Explanation. The first king, Ptolemy I, dies. He names his child Ptolemy II. In addition, as they were clashing, by the way, Ptolemy II gave himself a last name, Philadelphia, more specifically Philadelphus. So he calls himself a brotherly love man of peace, but they're trying to bring about a treaty of peace. So he tries to marry his daughter. That's what the passage said. He tried to marry his daughter named Bernice to one of the kings of Seleucids to try to bring about a little bit of peace. However, let's go to verse 7. But one of the descendants of her line will arise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he will deal with them and display great strength. So the person they're talking about here is a guy named Ptolemy III. He succeeded his father, and the Ptolemies are a little bit stronger than the Seleucids. So the Egyptian territory of the Greek Empire is stronger. Let's move on to verse 8. Also, their gods and their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold, he, Ptolemy III, will take into captivity to Egypt, and he, on his part, will refrain from attacking the kingdom of the north for years. So what happened? Ptolemy III went up into Syria, present-day Syria, the Seleucid Empire, and took all these possessions that used to belong to Egypt, and he brought them back down. Exactly as Daniel stated in 533 BC. And all of these events are taking place around 300 BC. It's over 200 years later. So now we go to verse 9. Then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but will return to his own land. What's going on? Well, one of the first leaders of the Seleucids was Antiochus the first. He names his son Antiochus the second. He names his son Antiochus the third. So Antiochus the third was up here in Seleucid area near Syria. He's trying to go down to Egypt, and he doesn't win. That's what the passage is saying. The king of the north goes down to the king of the south and doesn't become victorious. Verse 10, his sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war up to this very fortress. One of the descendants is Seleucus. He died in 226 BC, and now his sons have come on board, and they are trying to attack the Ptolemies. Now, let me pause with all of this and restate something important, maybe to illustrate from my story of the honeybees a few weeks ago. There's a spot underneath the siding over here where the bees have made a nest. And when I was first attacking them, I didn't have much to fight or to use other than sprays, and they weren't doing any good. So I went back to the original resource, a fly swatter. But I wasn't going to stand right next to them. I stood on the other side of the pachysandrus on the sidewalk, and every time I would see a bee hovering over a spot, there was my chance. I would immediately rush on top of the plants and try to swat the bees, and then I would go back. It wasn't until like 30 minutes later that I realized, what have I done? And I've been stomping on top of all the pachysandrus trying to get to the bees. That's what's taking place in all these verses. Every time the country to the north attacks the country to the south, or the south goes to the north, they literally stomp on Israel. And when they need to go to the grocery store, they're hungry on their march. Well, let's just go in and raid the grocery stores. Let's just go in someone's house and raid their refrigerator. Oh, my shoes just fell apart. Let's just take the Israelite shoes. I mean, their stuff is getting stolen, trampled on. They just march through their fields where they're trying to grow crops. The army didn't care. They're just stomping all over it. The harassment for years and years is taking place. That's the key. God intentionally had the north and the south to be on opposite sides of Jerusalem, so all of this nightmare would take place. Let's go back to verse 11. The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. We're now to nearly the beginning of the 3rd century BC. Let me read what one person has said. In response, Ptolemy IV, the king of the south, launched a counterattack. Both armies were quite large. According to one author, Ptolemy's forces consisted of 70,000 infantry, 5,000 cavalry, and 73 elephants. Whereas Antiochus's army had 62,000 infantry, 6,000 cavalry, and 102 elephants. When the battle ended, Ptolemy had won a great victory in the land of Palestine. They're fighting each other in Palestine. I mean, the Israelites are going, we didn't join this battle, but the harassment is taking place. Verse 12, when the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. Explanation. Because of this victory, Ptolemy's heart was, as it says right there, it was lifted up. Ptolemy became filled with pride. The Egyptian army slaughtered many thousands of the Syrian troops. One author even reports that Antiochus lost 17,000 soldiers. So not only are they trampling on your property, stepping and crushing on all of your produce in your farm, taking food out of your groceries, but they're leaving their dead bodies lying around your yard. Are you aware of 40 years ago here in Youngstown, where the mafia of Pittsburgh, that direction, Pittsburgh, would meet the mafia of Cleveland halfway here in Youngstown? They would kill each other, leave the bodies, and then go back home. And we got the reputation of being the murder capital of America. Well, that's what's taking place. A group from the north and a group from the south is coming together to fight on the land of Israel. Verse 13, now things change. And verse 12, and before it was the Egyptians, or we would say the Ptolemies. But now the king of the north becomes powerful. So we see in verse 13, the king of the north will again raise a great multitude than the former, and after an interval of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment. So what's going on? The Seleucids have now gained greater power after more than 100 years, and now they're starting to overcome the Ptolemies. There's more I could read, but what I wanted to read all that just so that you guys could see every verse is giving something prophetic going on, one after another, with extreme accuracy. That's amazing to me. God is amazing. And He has your future already mapped out as well. He already knows which decisions you're going to make today and what will take place. But I want us now to look at verse 14 and start hitting a few highlights. Now in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south. The violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. The point I want you to see, people want to fight for what they want, and the other part, look what happens to the end of their lives. There's nothing to say of them. They all die. They're all fighting selfishly for no cause at all. Go to verse 16. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases. There's that phrase again. And no one will be able to withstand him. He will also stay for a time in the beautiful land, that's Israel, with destruction in his hand. Skip down to verse 20. Then in his place one will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of the kingdom, yet within a few days he will be shattered, though not in anger or in battle. All this is taking place to lead up to this next section in Daniel 11. What we've seen so far has been Persia up until about 160, 170 BC. But now the worst of the worst towards Israel begins in verse 21. We've seen his name in the past few weeks. In chapter 8, he's called the Little Horn of Greece. So remember, Greece is divided into 4 kingdoms, the Seleucids, and the 8th king of the Seleucids is now being mentioned in chapter 11, verse 21. In his place, a despicable person will arise, on whom the honor of the kingship has not been conferred. But he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue. The idea is nobody expected this. We would say in America, who is that guy running for president? We've never heard of him before. Boom, then he becomes president. That's the situation here. Who is this guy? And he was greatly despicable. He hated other people. Let's go to verse 25. He will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south with a large army. So the king of the south will mobilize an extremely large and mighty army for war, but he will win. He will stand, for schemes will be devised against him. Verse 25 to 28 state that Antiochus Epiphanes, this 8th king, he's actually Antiochus the 4th, he will be victorious over the Ptolemies and all of Egypt. And then he decides later, let's go get even more land down there. So now in verse 29, we have where the worst of the worst starts to take place. At the appointed time, he will return and come into the south. He wants more land in Egypt. But this last time, he will turn out the way it won't turn out the way it did before. For the ships of Kittim, which is another name for the island of Cyprus, will come against him. It turns out that's referring to ships loaded with Roman soldiers. The Roman Empire is about to declare its dominance in the next several years. So once again, we're getting exact, precise things stating. And it will come against him, therefore he, Antiochus, will be disheartened and will return. Let me tell you what took place then. He's taken his army. I think they've gone past Cairo, and they're going towards the area of Alexandria, that area. And all of a sudden, one Roman officer comes out of the city, maybe a couple of miles, and meets Antiochus and his army. They could have defeated this one man. But that one officer said, "You better not go one step further." He drew a line around him and said, "You better not take one step outside of that circle without our permission." Which was his way of saying, take one step forward, we'll kill you. As we see in the passage, he will remind Antiochus of what the Romans did to his relative up in the land of Turkey, just destroyed them. And Antiochus, this great mighty leader who wants to be the next king of the world, turns around and tucks his tail between his legs and walks away, pouting, "I've been defeated." He doesn't take it that easily. Look now at the rest of verse 30. So he will come back and show regard for those. Excuse me, I need to go back. Let me read the whole verse 30. For the ships of Kittim will come against him, therefore he will be disheartened, and will return and become enraged at Israel, the holy covenant, and take action. So he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary, the temple in Jerusalem, the fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice. Why? He doesn't want God to be worshipped. He is great. He wants to be worshipped. Keep in mind what's taking place. When you go from north to the south or south to the north, you got to go through Israel. So when this pouting king left the land of Egypt, he was enraged. We men know what that is. He's full of anger. He's got to release his anger. He doesn't have a wall to punch his fist through. So he sees the Jews and he slaughters 40,000 Jews in 3 days. Not with machine guns, not with bombs, one sword at a time. 40,000 Jews just living their lives normally, and all of a sudden someone comes through town and kills all of them. To this day, every Jew remembers Antiochus Epiphanes. He went beyond just killing them. He went beyond that to say you can't even worship God anymore in your temple. He placed this temple of Zeus in there. And then while he is sacrificing to his god Zeus, using what they used, that happened to be a desecration to the Jews. He placed a pig, the most hated of all things to Jews, on the altar in the temple in Jerusalem. To the Jews, we're talking the whole place is smeared with filth. Oh, this is awful. Jews don't have any positive words to say about this guy. And God is telling the Jews 400 years in advance that this is coming. And there's one person who is far worse than Antiochus, who is still coming. He's mentioned in verses 36 to 45. We know him today as the Antichrist. Verse 36, then the king will do as he pleases. Oh, heard that phrase before? He will exalt and magnify himself. Now, at least when Antiochus was here, he bowed down to his god Zeus in the temple. But this guy, the Antichrist, is going to put himself above God Almighty. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods. And he will prosper until the indignation is finished. For that which is decreed will be done. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers or for the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god. Here it is. He will magnify himself above them all. Selfishness can drive people crazy. But this is the ultimate of selfishness. This is the guy being controlled by the devil himself. The Antichrist wants complete control. Verse 38, instead he will honor a God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers did not know. He will honor him with gold, silver, costly stones, and treasures. He will take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will give great honor to those who acknowledge him and will cause them to rule over the many and will parcel out land for a price. You want to live? All you have to do is bow down to him and say he's God. He'll make you the ruler of anything. Just say that he is God. And if you don't, you will die. Just use the words from the book of Revelation. Take the mark of the beast and you will live. That's all you have to do. Just bow down to Satan, the Antichrist. That's all you have to do. By the way, this nonsense is not going to begin. It's already begun thousands of years over the years. It's taking place in America. Don't you dare worship God. If we see anyone go to church, we're going to put you in jail. That's already taking place in America. Think back COVID. Shut down the churches. We don't care if the building holds 5,000 people. We don't want any more than 10. I wouldn't be surprised if they sent someone for the fun of it to become the 11th person so they could arrest the other 10 who were there. You will worship me, not God. The ultimate of selfishness is, I don't care about God. I want what I want. And if we really apply this message well, I think we'll all admit we're all selfish. But if it continues without control, we become just like the devil. Go down to verse 43. He will gain control over the hidden treasures of gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt. And Libyans and Ethiopians will follow at his heels. But rumors from the east and from the north will disturb him, and he will go forth with great wrath to destroy and annihilate many. He will pitch the tents of his royal pavilion between the seas and on the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he will come to his end, and no one will even care. No one will help him. Here, everything we've read so far in chapter 11 is total selfishness. And it's so sad we read history books and they talk about how wonderful Alexander the Great was because he slaughtered tens of thousands of people across the world. Oh, how great Xerxes was because he slaughtered people. And Xerxes was so goofy and out of his head. The one time when he tried to attack the Greeks, he didn't want to go around the isthmus, so he had his engineers design a pontoon bridge. Overnight, a storm came, destroyed the bridge, and Xerxes was so ballistically bonkery crazy that he had his men to take those 300 Phoenician and Egyptian engineers and cut off their heads. And then he had his right-hand men to take whips and go to the sea. Thou wicked sea, thou hast done the king harm, and he has not done thee harm. That's what crazy, goofy Xerxes literally did. And the more we become selfish, the more we become just like the devil. There's an interesting little light shining in verses 32 to 35. While all of Antiochus Epiphanes' horror was taking place, a few of the Jews did something that some scholars say was not totally godly, some say it was. I don't want to go into that, but I want to bring up one thing that the passage does reflect as a positive. When Antiochus Epiphanes said, "You worship me," these people said, "No." Wow. You know these people, the Maccabees, led by Judas Maccabees, who overthrew that, and they cleansed their own temple from all this grossness that was put in there. That was mentioned. So the second major part of the message is godliness in a few. The few who said, we will not worship God even if it cost us our life. We will not give in to all this COVID stuff and all this you know what I mean, when they start manipulating us. Oh, you have to take the mark of the beast. You have to do this or we'll kill you. That's intensifying. They want to mutilate the bodies of kids now, and they won't parent. If you say one word about your kids being destroyed, they'll put you in prison if that passes in November. It's going on right now. But this passage says God is going to honor those who are willing to stand up and say, no, I will not bow down to you. I'd like for us to look at the last part of this section. It actually appears in the first 3 verses of chapter 12. These are the final destinations. The final destinations. It follows our Sunday school lesson. Wickedness will always be punished. And this passage says there's a final destination for the ungodly and a final destination for the godly. Verse 1 says, now at that time Michael, the great prince, who stands guard over the sons of your people. In other words, he's, you might say, the guardian angel. I don't particularly like that phrase, but he's the angel, the archangel over all of Israel. As it states, the sons of your people. And he will arise. There will be a time of distress such as never occurred. It will be far worse than Antiochus Epiphanes. Then so will be a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. The passage is saying, if you give in to selfishness, you will have an awful destination for eternity. That's what it says. Eternity, everlasting contempt. But if you're willing to say no to people who are demanding that you bow down to them, I'm not going to give any details, but I desperately want to. Most Christians in the world, most Christians here in America are clueless to the horror that Christians are experiencing in other nations. The torture, the pain, I'm talking non-stop horror and pain. One of the most popular things that some groups do is to have a professional doctor standing next to you to make sure you don't die. And just as your body is about to die, they withdraw the pain just a little bit so that you won't die. And then when your body recuperates, they put all the pain back on you. Maximum horror. Not only to you, but even to people you love. Either give in or the pain will increase. This is reality. This is what the passage is saying. And the bottom line is God saying, will you love me to the end just like Jesus loved his heavenly Father to the end? And truthfully, when all of this mess is over with and we'll go up to heaven, God has said, eye has not seen nor ear heard nor has entered the hearts of men the things that God has prepared for those who love him. And Paul even said, I reckon that the sufferings of this present world are not worthy to be compared to the glory that we shall receive in heaven. The pain here is nothing compared to all the glory that we will receive. Will you be faithful to the end? I'd like for us to look at 3 quick applications. The first, how selfish are you? The point is, we're all selfish. We're all human beings. Jesus stated in Matthew 7, point blank, you are evil. That's a word-for-word quote from Jesus to human beings. And we're all sinners. We are. The question is not, are you selfish? The question is, how selfish are you? Do you complain about the weather? Do you complain about different things not being just right? Do you complain about things not being done your way? Do you complain when people cut you off when you're on the streets? I had that loveliness take place when I was coming here. I was going east on I-76. There's a point where it goes north so you can go through downtown Akron. Well, I don't want that. I want to stay straight and then go north on 77. Well, as I'm driving, all of a sudden I'm going the speed limit in the far left lane because the exit's coming up soon. All of a sudden this van passes me, and he makes sure his rear bumper misses my front bumper by at least an inch. I'm going, whoa, and for some reason I did not slam on brakes. It must have been God, because when I looked up in my rearview mirror, there's the grill of the truck behind me, right behind my car. I found out those two guys were in cahoots with each other. Like he wanted me to slam on brakes so the bad guy could run over me. And then the second guy passes and has to yell his profanity at me, you need to get in the right lane. How can we speedsters and law-breaking citizens do what we want to do if you're over there? Well, my exit's coming up soon. So he passes me. He's in like a 24-foot-long straight truck, and he passes and gets in front of his truck, goes over the top of my car. Selfishness. How selfish are you? Do you get angry at those moments? Someone gets in front of you at the grocery store. Someone gets the item that you want. The next question somehow or another got worded wrong, so it was supposed to say, will you confess your selfishness? Will you confess your selfishness, whatever it is? You think you're not selfish until you get married, and all of a sudden you marry someone who wants to squeeze the toothpaste from the middle, but you squeeze it from the end. They rolled the paper towels over the front. You want it to roll over the back. I mean, all these differences take, for the first time you see many more things that are different. And then you join a church. And some people want things this way, and some people want it that way. And then you work with other people on a project, and you say it has to be done this way, and they say it has to be done that way. If you're a woman, you're more people-oriented. If you're a man, you're more project-oriented. And then when you work together, it doesn't usually work that smoothly. Some people want to get jobs done now. Other people want to take the time and make sure it's precise. Can you allow other people to be different, or do you demand that your way has to be done your way? Will you confess your selfishness? And then the last part is, will you focus on loving others, especially those who persecute you? I don't know how I'm going to do if I'm ever persecuted for being a Christian. I know some Christians just can't take it, and I'm not saying anything negative. The pain is that horrible. Will you go to the very end and love your enemies? We're not saying endure the pain. We're talking loving your enemies. While I was with the boys this week, they were getting at it again. The first night, they didn't stop talking and yelling until 2 in the morning. I still got up at 5. I don't know how. I think God woke me up. But then a few nights later, they're at it again, and they're staying up late. And you got my item. You got my this. And I said, boys, 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 I told you at the very beginning, we want you to be men. We want you to grow up. Everything you guys talk about is what you want. One of the things we want to teach you, and I said it in a peaceful and as loving way as I could, we want you to move beyond selfishness to love and caring for other people. I said, do you know the first night you stayed up till 2 o'clock, and my bedtime is like 9:30 to 10 now? I got only 3 hours of sleep. How many of you are complaining because of the lack of sleep I got? Well, no one raised his hand. So I said, so you're saying you care more about yourself than you do about me? And I'd like for us to turn that around for us. Do you love other people? Say, even the Christians around the world who are suffering horribly. Or do you complain only when it starts to be on you? If you're like I am, it's easy to be out of sight, out of mind. But we need to love all people. And that's a sign of really being a follower of Jesus. Not that we are not selfish, but that we love others, even in the midst of our pain. Would you bow your heads for prayer?